All right, we're live. So, Aaron, let's start with the obvious question. Who are you and what do you do?
My name is Aaron Campbell, and I lead the WordPress core security team. That's what I do full-time, funded by GoDaddy to do that, so I get to spend all my time trying to keep WordPress secure.
So you actually don't do anything but WordPress. GoDaddy's just like, yeah, we want to have Aaron on our team doing WordPress and not WordPress only.
Correct. And actually, when they hired me to do that, I was a part of the security team, but was not leading it at the time. I was still doing a lot around WordPress core. It just wasn't leading the security team. But yes, I spend all my time doing WordPress stuff.
So how long have you been involved with WordPress core itself?
With core itself, a little over 10 years would be a rough estimate. I think that my first patches went in 2007. So
Nice.
yeah,
So
about then.
as long as I've been using WordPress, you've been contributing to core. Nicely done.
Yeah, that's the way it is for quite a few people. All right.
So, given that, I think you have a pretty good ability to speak to it. So, how, in your mind, does the WordPress project handle security? How do they think about it? What's the process look like? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of other projects that sort of grew up by happenstance, I guess, that's changed a lot along the way. Um, Now we take a much more proactive approach to security than we did in the past. So a lot of our methods have been changing. We have programs like HackerOne so that we can reward through even monetary methods the people that are reporting security vulnerabilities to us. So we're actively looking for issues both in the core software and in our website properties, so WordPress.org and WordCamp.org and all those. But we also have we also try to take a much more active role in paying attention to the new code that's going in, even having the security team review some of that, all the new features that are going in and those kinds of things. We get our eyes on them before they ever go in. So we're trying to take a much more proactive approach to security.
So each individual feature, even if it's not specifically related to security, will have some kind of security review, you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, some of that's in our coding standards. Some of that helps,
Mm.
the basic things like making sure that patches don't get in without the proper escaping in the right places, all that kind of stuff. Pretty much all the core committers um, are brought up to speed on that, and so they can review those smaller patches as they go in, but especially bigger features. When they drop in, they have had a review through the security team before they ever do.
Mm.
So you'll see things like when bigger projects like the REST API went in, we've already had people looking through the Gutenberg code and that kind of stuff, so that before it ever goes in, it's had specifically looking for potential security issues. Obviously, no one's perfect. We can't necessarily find all of them, but we certainly want to find them before that code ever goes into core.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, so all new features get reviewed. What about like existing features that someone discovers a security problem in? How does that process look internally? Does it just go
Um,
on track? Does it?
no, well, yes and no. Let me say first, um, security. If you think you've found a security issue, you should never open a ticket on track for that. The best thing to do is to go to hackerone.com/WordPress and report it there. The process starts right then when it's reported. As soon as a report is opened, an integration with our security Slack channel drops a message right in there so that everybody knows that there's a new issue and we can go look at it. So that's the absolute best way. If for some reason you can't or won't open an issue on HackerOne, at least email security@wordpress.org so that we can keep it private. We want to be able to fix the security issue before we announce the security issue. And unfortunately, we do have a lot of people that follow along on track, and even in the public channels on Slack, and certainly our code repositories, looking for that kind of stuff because we're kind of a big target. But once that report has been opened, it goes through a triaging process where we usually try to assign a person in our team to look at it. Sometimes that's actually a few people or just whoever's got the time available when it comes in to attempt to repeat the steps. If they can verify that it is a security issue, then it gets triaged in and becomes something that needs to be assigned and worked on and handled. If they can verify that it's not a security issue, then they will probably close it. We do get a lot of bogus reports. It happens. A lot of people that don't understand some of the basics, or mostly that don't read our sort of list of things that we want and don't want as far as security reports. We understand that administrator users and editors can post JavaScript. That's a really common one. And so if you try to open a ticket on HackerOne and it catches certain keywords, you'll actually get an interstitial that says, "Are you sure? Because if this is an administrator or an editor, it's not real XSS." People just click through and ignore that. So those kinds we close, and then some of them we have to ask for additional information. We weren't able to reproduce it, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's not a real issue. So there might be some back and forth before we can even triage it as, an actual issue or something that we don't need to worry about.
So if I can just jump in, there are a class of issues that are things that could be considered security vulnerabilities, but that are kind of intended behavior because we trust that admins on WordPress sites should be able to put some JavaScript in certain places, because that's kind of what it comes with being an admin, is the responsibility to not attack your own readers.
Yep. There's
that philosophy a bit, yeah.
Yeah, well, there's always a balance with security, or with software in general when you're looking at security, between and being usable. Your software to be usable, to be able to accomplish a purpose. So admins need to be able, editors as well, need to be able to put JavaScript in their posts, to put JavaScript in areas, because it's part of making their website do the thing that they want it to do. So our job as a security team is to help find that balance, really. It's not just about sort of locking and slamming all the doors. It's about making sure that we do keep it as secure as possible while still letting people accomplish what they want with the software.
Yeah. You don't want to make it as secure as a computer in the backyard under
right. Well, I mean, you could make WordPress completely unhackable. You just delete all the files and it's done, right? It can never be hacked. It's also completely useless. So there's clearly a balance there somewhere.
So to go on the other direction from that, you mentioned, so you've decided that yes, this is a legitimate security issue and we need to do something about it. What does that process look like of figuring out what code will fix it, testing that fix, deploying that fix so that the public is protected?
So generally speaking, we will try to have someone from the security team in charge of actually owning any specific ticket. Somebody that's good in that particular area, right? A lot of our team have kind of specialties, things that they're very good at. We have a private security track, so we do use track much like you see core using it. We upload patches, we can test, we can all comment and go back and forth on our internal track. That has changed a little bit as we've been using HackerOne more and more. Some of the back and forth happens on HackerOne, which allows us to involve the reporter of the issue.
Ah, gotcha.
Which once we've kind of got a patch in place, if we're the ones that are writing it and the reporter didn't offer something to begin with, then we'll usually get that back to the reporter and have them look at it and see if it actually fixes all the issues that they had originally seen. Just in case we maybe accidentally missed something. We want to be careful of that. We don't ever want to put a fix out that's like a 75% fix, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense as a concern of
So,
by partially patching, you might make it visible to people.
exactly. If we patch part of it, then all of a sudden people go, oh, there was an issue here, and they want to kind of and see if it's still exploitable. And if it is, that wasn't good. We drew attention to it, but didn't actually fix it. So we want to be careful about that. The back and forth can sometimes take a long time. Some security issues are really complex. Finding that balance between fixing it and still making everything work, not breaking anything, can be difficult. And some are super easy, but some take a lot of time. But once we get the fix out, we start to discuss when is the best, or once we get the fix, I guess, completed and ready and tested, then there's usually some discussion on whether it should be packaged with a couple other things, whether we should do a release right away. You know, a release gets scheduled. We have a private Slack channel for notifying for notifying hosts that that there's going to be an update. A lot of them, this kind of stuff can affect their infrastructure pretty heavily. They have so many WordPress installs that when we start pushing out updates, it's pretty noticeable. And since security releases aren't sort of announced far in advance publicly, we have a way of notifying them privately, both through a Slack channel and through a mailing list. And then the release goes much like everyone has seen it go before. We get the patches in, we push out the release. It's just that it happens much faster with a security release. We put a post up, and 99% of the time, that details all the information about the various issues that were patched and fixed. There is that rare occasion where we feel like it's important to give some additional time between release and disclosure. That happened for 4.7.2 for the a REST API issue, something that we wanted to make sure that we got as many sites updated before it was being used anywhere. We had the benefit of being able to get a lot of input back from hosts and places like that to know that it wasn't being actively exploited. So we gave it time before we actually disclosed it. But yeah, once things are disclosed, then, I mean, that's a wrap.
Then all heck can break loose. Yeah, so that actually brings up the question of like, what about the person who finds the bug probably wants some props for it, some involvement in seeing it done. And sometimes they'll specify a disclosure window, I'm assuming, where world about this by this date if you don't act. How does that weigh on the process of when you make security releases? Is that somehow waived in HackerOne, or is it just like, yeah, we have to balance that against everything else?
Setting hard deadlines like that is really difficult. It definitely makes the process more difficult. I'm of the mind that you never want to rush security more than it needs to be. So if a thing is in the wild and being potentially actively exploited, then yes, obviously you act like the building's burning down and you rush around and you get things fixed and pushed out. But when it's not, there's no reason to freak out. You can take your time and do it right. And this is where it's important to make sure that we get the 100% fix, not the 75% fix, right? And putting a deadline on that, whether we do it ourselves by saying, hey, we want a release out on this date, we want to try to squish this in there, or whether it's put on by the reporter because they say they're going to make it public at a specific date. Those are, but in both cases, that's sort of artificially imposing some of that added pressure that just isn't particularly helpful. A lot of times, good communication with the reporter can help with that. We can say, hey, I know that you want to publish this in 3 weeks, but we really need more time than that. Can we push it out further? Or better yet, can we make sure that you will be the first one to publish, because we will coordinate the release with you and we'll let you publish it, right as we release. We don't know exactly when that's going to be, but we'll give you that ability. And the ones that say yes to that, that's kind of best case scenario for us. But yeah, otherwise it's an added pressure, and we will sometimes have to push to get things done in a less than reasonable time frame if that's the case.
So a thing that's coming to mind as I think about this is, so in 3.7, if I remember right, we got auto updating to WordPress. And I think for the most part, security releases are backporting all the way back. Is that accurate? How do you think about that?
They are, in fact, currently being backported all the way to 3.7. Unfortunately, that's not something that we can continue to do forever. It's got a few struggles. First of all, we're doing 12 releases every time we do a release now, or a security release at least. And that's a lot. Additionally, patching that far back, the code base between 4.8 and 3.7 is so different that you almost always need to completely write a whole new different patched if the problem persisted that long. It's likely that the code may be in different files, has been completely revamped, but this security issue stayed there. And the more of these that we have to do, the more chances there are of us making mistakes, not to mention the burden involved with having to potentially write 12 patches instead of 1, considering that the whole security team is volunteer, that's very high, it's very heavy. So while right now we're going back to 3.7, I can pretty confidently say that we will not forever. I do think that we will always backport some. I think that if our goal is not just to secure WordPress core, but to actually keep our users secure, which is definitely our goal, then backporting is what's responsible there. But I would like to see us backporting 3 versions instead of 12.
Sure. That seems like a reasonable idea to me. Yeah, I think the tension that exists in WordPress that you're highlighting is this, do we do what's best for our users or best for us as the maintainers? And that's really a tough tension to balance. All right, well, I think I want to move into kind of broadening out. If you think of someone who's a WordPress, site owner or maybe a developer, what things do you think they should do? I think the one that feels automatic from what we've been talking about is update, but are there any unconventional or unexpected ones that come to mind, or just generally, what do you think people should make sure they're doing?
I mean, obviously updating, yes, is absolutely important. The truth is, for your kind of average user slash site owner, it's less about the unconventional and more about actually doing all the things that are the conventional, more simple things. Passwords are still notoriously terrible. People do a horrible job. People don't use password managers. That's a thing that you need to be using if you want to have good password practices online. My passwords are 50 characters and randomly generated, and you just can't do that without a password manager. Taking the time to choose a good host, considering things like security when you do that. It's not that you have to pay a fortune, but if you are going for the absolute cheapest reseller host or whatever, security should be a thing that you ask them about. What are they doing to keep your site secure? So that's something that not a lot of people think about necessarily going in.
Technical person, how do you think you know that the security answer you got back is good?
A lot of people have asked me this, and it's tough. It's a little nuanced, but I actually think that it often has less to do with the technical information you get back and more, did they have an answer? Were they able to talk to you seemingly intelligently about it? Because if they say, oh, I don't know, let me see what we do, that's probably not the best answer. You want them to know, even if you don't understand it. So that's generally what I tell people.
So their ability to have an answer ready at hand probably means that someone thought about it. Whereas if they don't, that's probably a bad sign.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, they're the things that they need to be doing is similar to what you're doing too. Do they say that they're keeping their software updated and patched? All the software that you're not wanting to worry about, everything that sits below WordPress. That's the same kind of stuff that they should be doing, and they need to have proactive plan in place for doing that. Not, oh yeah, every few months we check and make sure that we update. No, how does my server get security updates? Does that happen?
Cool. So I think we just touched on passwords and updates and making sure that the host is thinking about security. Anything else you think that is really important to keep in mind or think about?
I always try to encourage people that they should take their passwords to the next level with two-factor auth. Understand that it's still not the most enticing technology to use, because it adds an extra step. Every login takes you an extra 30 seconds to do, or whatever it is. But the amount of additional security you get from putting two-factor anywhere that you can is amazing. So bite the bullet, do the hard thing, and spend that extra 30 seconds per login, and it's a huge boost to people's security for sure.
I can endorse both parts of that.
Yeah.
Both the it's such a hassle and the it clearly is,
It is. I
going to
mean,
make
one
you
of
more
the,
secure.
yeah, even if you have a fantastic password, passwords are still flawed to a certain extent. The biggest problem is that we don't change them very regularly. I'm a very security conscious person, and I definitely have passwords that are 8 months old, right? And so if
Hmm.
those passwords are fished out of something on a bad Wi-Fi that I'm connected to, or who knows what else, um, they're still valid for months and months and months. Somebody can go back through and use them. With two-factor, it's like changing your password every 30 seconds. So even if somebody does get a hold of it, it's no good to them just a couple minutes later. So it's a big difference.
Great. All right. Well, Aaron, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about security.
Absolutely.
All right. Talk to you soon.